My daughter-in-law is not family, so she's in the way. With those words echoing, the car drove off, leaving me behind, lost in unfamiliar mountains on unknown terrain. I felt utterly bewildered, and Mason's funeral is about to start. A few days earlier, upon hearing the grave news about Mason, my husband and I rushed to his family's home. Everyone had been prepared for Mason's passing since he had been in the hospital for some time. Rather than a sense of sorrow, it felt more like relief that Mason was finally free from pain. However, the funeral preparations were quite a challenge. My husband's family home, situated in the mountains, is the main branch of the family. They used to own vast lands in the past. Although the family's fortune was squandered by the grandfather's generation, their pride as the main family remained. During occasions like Christmas or family gatherings, many relatives would come, and I was always roped in to help. Given that Mason was the head of such a family, his funeral had to be grand. So my mother-in-law, Wyatt, my husband, and Grace, his sister, were all in a frenzy. Our family is the main branch. The funeral has to be grander than for Mason's younger brother, right? We're expecting about 100 attendees. Maybe I should get a new pearl necklace for the occasion, Grace exclaimed. While everyone voiced their opinions, I, the daughter-in-law, was left to handle all the preparation. Austin, ensure you discuss everything properly with the funeral home. You know it best. Please make sure to choose the best altar and coffin. The catering after the viewing should be from that fancy restaurant. Their steak is delicious, my mother-in-law instructed. Truth be told, due to family circumstances, I had worked at a funeral home before getting married. This seemed to be another reason the in-laws looked down upon me. I certainly know the ins and outs of funeral preparations, so I don't mind handling them. But it's frustrating that they push all the planning and communication with the relatives onto me, yet never miss an opportunity to voice their opinions. It's the worst. Upgrading the altar will cost an additional $200, and the coffin is $400 more. Is that okay? I asked. It's the daughter-in-law's duty to manage such things. Typically, the deceased's favorite dishes are served during the viewing. If the dishes look cheap, it'll be embarrassing. Just do as you're told with the gifts from all the attendees. We'll manage. My mother-in-law replied. Reluctantly, I went ahead with the preparations to ensure a grand funeral to their satisfaction. Then came the day of the funeral. 4 of us got into the car. My husband was driving from the in-laws' house. However, as we approached the mountain path, the car suddenly halted. Look, those wild lilies over there were Dad's favorites. Austin, could you pick some for us? My mother-in-law requested. Huh, where exactly? Right there in the woods. Quickly, go grab some. Though I couldn't see the flowers from inside the car, I thought I might spot them up close, so I stepped out. Just then, Mason had everything thought out and arranged for us. No sooner had Sue spoken than the car sped off. I stood there completely taken aback, watching it disappear. My name's Austin, and I'm 42. In reality, due to personal reasons, I had dropped out of school and worked at a funeral home until I got married. I didn't dislike the job, but the erratic hours and scarce days off wore me out. It was around that time I met Wyatt, introduced by a friend. Wyatt was 6 years older than me and seemed very dependable. He told me it was okay if I wanted to quit my job, and that led us to get married. In hindsight, it might have been a way for me to escape my situation. Now, nevertheless, we've been married for 20 years. Although we haven't had children, I believe we've managed fairly well with my kind-hearted husband. Well, except for the dealings with his family. His family was all about pride, being the main branch and showing off. Whenever there was a family gathering or Christmas, they would go all out with a feast to welcome the relatives, and all of that preparation fell on my shoulders. Neither Sue nor Grace, who lived with them, would lift a finger to help. They just sit and critique. I told my husband multiple times I didn't want to visit them at our home. He helps with chores, but at his family's, he feels free of responsibilities, so he never refuses to go. On top of that, he acted all macho only when we're at his family's place, like he's whipped. However, every time we returned home, he'd apologize profusely and try to make it up to me. Eventually, for the sake of our marriage, I decided to endure these visits, but only twice a year. But I never expected them to dump the entire preparation for Mason's funeral on me. Look, Austin, You've got to handle all of Dad's funeral. What are you saying? I can help, but it's not all on me. Why not? You worked at a funeral home, right? You know everything about it. We have no clue about funerals. Please handle it. I reluctantly agreed, but that's when the nightmare began. The funeral home the hospital recommended has a bad reputation. Austin, can you find a better one? That funeral venue looked old, didn't it? Change it to a nicer one. White chrysanthemums are so gloomy. Pick something more vibrant. Every decision I made with the funeral director was criticized, forcing me to redo the arrangements repeatedly. In between, I had to contact all the relatives, arrange taxis for the elderly, and handle the return gifts. There was an endless list of tasks. Austin, I'm hungry. Can you hurry with the food? Anticipate our needs without us having to ask. Instead of grabbing a sandwich from the convenience store, they demanded meals from me. I'm swamped with funeral preparations. Wyatt, tell them to sort out their own meals. I finally asked my husband, but with the confidence from being home, he frowned at my request. But you're the wife. You should handle meals. Frustrated by his attitude and lack of support, I served them simple pasta. Wow, that's lazy. If you're serving pasta, you should add snacks. Yeah, Mom's right. Facing their unreasonable demands during Mason's funeral preparations, I realized arguing was a waste. I just did as told. I hope you're arranging the funeral as instructed. The altar and coffin are top of the line. I finished contacting all the relatives, and the return gifts are ready. No issues there. Better not be any mistakes. Stop talking down to me, especially when you dump everything on me. After the viewing, my husband's attitude infuriated me, leading to a heated exchange. Mason appreciated me. He even called me before his death, thanking me for putting up with all your unreasonable demands. In my husband's family, only Mason treated me with kindness. Before he passed, he called just for me, saying thank you for all you've done. I'm sorry for the unreasonable demands everyone constantly makes. Anyway, you know funeral preparations. Better just get it done. Is everything financially sound? After all, you've been demanding top-notch everything without checking prices. Just do what you're told. If you keep arguing, we might as well divorce. Taken aback by the sudden mention of divorce, I asked, "Are you serious?" Absolutely. My mom always said I should have married someone better. Excuse me? My cousin, who recently got divorced and came back to the family, is stunningly beautiful. She even won a university beauty contest. Why didn't you tell me? At the viewing, my aunt kept pestering me about marrying her after divorcing you. During the post-viewing dinner, while I was swamped with serving tea and cleaning up, Wyatt just sat there sipping beer and chatting with relatives. I couldn't believe that was the topic of their conversation. As I fumed in silence, Wyatt's kind confidence grew. I kept telling myself to hold on just one more day until the funeral was over. The next day, we were on our way to the funeral in a car driven by my husband. But as we reached the mountain path, Sue demanded I pick lies for Mason, and they left me stranded there. Usually my husband wouldn't pull a stunt like this, but there he was smirking at me from the speeding car. He probably had that beautiful cousin he mentioned yesterday on his mind. At this point, whatever I've done, all I could for the funeral. The funeral service will handle the rest. Although being left was quite shocking, there was a slight relief in knowing I didn't have to oblige to the family's every whim anymore. My real issue now? How to navigate this mountain path in my funeral attire and heels. How am I supposed to make my way through this? Exasperated, I sat down by the road. That's when a car stopped in front of me. Hours passed, and the funeral was nearing its end. Hey, where the hell are you, Austin? I received a frantic call from my husband. What's this about an $800,000 funeral bill? You better get here now. I could hear Sue's voice, almost a shriek, in the background. Serves you right. I had to stifle my laughter, hearing their predictable reaction. What's going on? There's no way we can afford an $800,000 funeral. Wasn't the plan for the gifts from the attendees to cover the funeral cost? The expected money didn't come through, plus only half of the expected guests showed up. Well, that figures. Gift amounts for funerals in this area range from $30 to $50. For close relatives like parents or siblings, gifts could range from $100 to even $11,000. But knowing how stingy some of our relatives can be, they'd probably give around $30 each. If 100 people each gave $30, that would only total $3,000. Furthermore, many of our relatives are elderly, and a good number of them wouldn't be able to attend the funeral. You should have seen this coming. Why didn't you tell us? I did several times, but you all insisted on the most expensive options. My husband was at a loss for words. Sue jumped in. Just get back here now. They plan to charge $300 if you were here, but without you, they're saying it's $800,000. What's going on? About that. When Sue told me to find a better funeral home, I was at my wit's end. So I reached out to the president of the funeral company I used to work at. He introduced me to a funeral home near our family home, and because of his influence, they agreed to do it at a much lower price. I had arranged a special price since I was involved, but since I'm not there, it can't be helped. Well, then you just need to come over now. Please, just do something about it. My husband pleaded. Well, I could come, but as I talked on the phone, I revealed myself to them. What, you're here actually? When I was lost on that mountain road, the car that stopped was driven by the person in charge from the funeral company. We had met several times to discuss plans, and he was quite shocked to see me sitting on the roadside. Once I explained the situation, he kindly drove me to the funeral hall. I wanted to pay my respects to Mason, so I asked him to bring me here, but I didn't want to be around all of you, so I stayed hidden. So, you were here after all? We can reduce the funeral cost now. My husband and Sue were practically dancing with joy. That won't be happening, I interjected. Why? Because according to you, I'm not a part of the family? Oh, come on. That was just a slip of the tongue. You're overreacting. You're my wife. I'm not anymore. What do you mean? You said you wanted a divorce, remember? You can go ahead and marry that beautiful, well-educated cousin of yours. Wait, before he could finish, Grace, who had been watching from nearby, lunged at me. Enough of your nonsense. Since you're here, we can get the funeral cost down to $300,000, right? No, I won't. And even if it's reduced, how do you plan on paying? We'll just withdraw it from my dad's bank account. He once mentioned he had about that much. That's not possible. Why not? When someone passes away, their bank accounts are frozen. You can't access the money. I heard if you don't inform the bank, it'll be fine. At Grace's comment, I couldn't help but smirk. Seeing my reaction, my husband panicked. You didn't tell the bank, did you? Of course I did. You told me to handle all the funeral matters, so I took the liberty to inform them as well. So, what do we do now? Or were you planning on covering it all? I wanted to say goodbye to Mason properly, which is why I had myself brought here. But since I didn't want to be around all of you, I stayed hidden. I then pulled out a bank book and showed it to them. The bank book I was holding was given to me by Mason just a bit before he passed it away. Mason had apologized for the past rudeness of his family and told me, since they'll probably have you handle all the funeral arrangements, please use this bank book to pay for the funeral expenses. He handed me a bank book with $300,000 in it. That's why I had consulted with the funeral director to ensure the cost would be kept within $300,000. But surely you can't withdraw that money, they argued. Actually, I can, I responded confidently. This account was set up with me as a pre-designated agent. In today's aging society, some banks offer a service where a person other than the account holder, if previously assigned, can withdraw funds. Mason was always so thoughtful, planning even for times he wouldn't be here. I said, hand over that bank book, they demanded. I won't. Mason gave clear instructions. If you ever treated me so poorly, I was to take this money as a settlement. And divorce, Mason once shared with me. You know, I'm married into the family, just like you, Austin. I truly understand how you feel. He was brought into Sue's home, who was an only daughter, in order to keep the family legacy. Although the previous generation had squandered most of the family wealth, leaving only the house they lived in, Sue and the relatives would often look down on him and say, "You, as the son-in-law, should just stay quiet." That's why Mason always cared for me. When he gave me the bank book, even knowing he didn't have much time left, He was more concerned about my well-being than his own. But that's Mason's inheritance, right? Daughter-in-laws don't have any rights to inherit, she retorted. Don't worry, he had left a will with a lawyer, and he told me it's clearly stated in there, I responded. The trio, unaware of my conversations with Mason, were stunned to learn about the existence of a will. The funeral is done, so I'll take my leave. Just a heads up, Sue apparently spent most of Mason's savings. There's hardly anything left, I said, seeing my husband on the verge of collapsing. I decided to twist the knife a bit further. You know, I'm going to divorce you and Sue for compensation in the divorce court for the way your family has treated me. If you refuse the divorce, be prepared. I'm willing to go to court, I said, turning on my heel to leave. The voices of the three of them echoed behind me, calling out in desperation. Don't say that, Austin. Please wait. Austin, I'm so sorry. Please come back. Please don't leave. I retorted, No way. Even if it comes down to $300,000, how are you going to pay it to cover the $800,000 funeral cost? The family had to sell their home, their sole inheritance, but since it was located in a remote countryside, they struggled to find a buyer. When they finally managed to sell it, the proceeds barely covered their debts, leaving them with nothing. With nowhere left to go, Sue and Grace, having lost their home, reluctantly moved in with my husband. However, living in a cramped 2-bedroom apartment, he complained constantly. My husband even emailed me about the daily struggles. After receiving dozens of emails from him begging, "Let's start over," I reached out to my trusted attorney and ensured there would be no further contact. I finally freed myself from the burden some in-laws and my spineless husband, who was constantly swayed by Sue and Grace. Now, I'm genuinely happy. Reconnecting with the funeral home's president during Mason's funeral arrangements led him to offer me a position, saying, "Would you like to come back?" I began working there again. Having been on the sending side during Mason's funeral, I believe I now understand the feelings of the grieving family better than in my younger, more passionate days. I'm hopeful that I can now offer funeral services that genuinely support and empathize with the bereaved families.
All right, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick? Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my 2nd year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. "I will do my best." Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. "Did you not hear what I said?" "I'm sorry." I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, "I'm thirsty." Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children, with zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job, having joined the company wanting to do customer service. "I don't care what they say, I plan to quit any time," he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look, "To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day." Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. "So, you all get a chance." As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. "Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them." It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. "All right, everyone's presentations are done." "Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something." Nick interrupted me. "There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer." He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! What's wrong? Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I obediently followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was. As the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, "I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong." Mike! What have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. "I didn't do anything wrong." "You're still saying that? Look at him." Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. "I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract?" Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. "Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go." Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. "Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him." There's no way he was pushed aside. "Don't make things worse here." "He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he?" I don't remember that part." I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.